So welcome everybody, good evening, and welcome to our first virtual speaker series here with Edmond Church of Christ. I'm Preston Watterson, and I'm a deacon with the Adult Ed Ministry, and I'll be kind of hosting these series over the next several months. Before we get started, I wanted to just share a few kind of administrative items about how the speaker series will work. Obviously, due to COVID precautions, we're not all able to gather together for our speaker series this fall. And so we've kind of concocted a different approach here on how we want to do it. And with the goal of, giving as many people access and giving the classes and giving you and your families the greatest amount of flexibility to kind of consume these lessons as you're able to. So a couple quick things about how this will work. We will have live lessons here on Zoom on this number every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. And I'll host them just like this. Those are going to go on basically through the end of this year, through to December 23rd, every Wednesday night. So we're not going to meet Thanksgiving week. But anyway, so every Wednesday night we'll be here on this number if you want to join us live. And anybody's welcome to join within our church or anybody you want to forward it to. So we'll be doing that live. Afterwards, we're going to be recording these lessons, and afterwards we'll be posting them to the church YouTube page and potentially sharing them in other ways with class leaders, along with some discussion questions. And so the goal here really is that, if you want to watch live and join us, or if you want to watch later, either individually or as a class, that you have the flexibility to do that. So, and then we're also going to have a few lessons there. Number 3, some pre-recorded lessons. Randy's been working on some recorded lessons on race relations that I think will be very timely for the church. So those will also be posted by the end of October. So as these lessons conclude, we're going to post them, and then we'll have that as well. So you'll have a lot of options to do here. For those of you who are here with us live on Zoom, got a bunch of people. Thanks for joining us live. I'm going to mute everybody right now, and I just want to make sure we don't have any errant noise as we go throughout the class. And then at the end, I will unmute everybody, and we'll have the opportunity to have some discussion or questions and answers. And then Brandon has appended some questions on the end of this so that if you're watching this at home or with your classes, you can take some time at the end to discuss as well. Finally, please be patient if we have technical difficulties. This is my first time doing this, so hopefully everything goes smoothly. Okay, so that's pretty much it in terms of the format. Like I said, we want to give all of you the flexibility to consume it. So whether you're with us live here right now, or whether you're watching it at home with your family, or maybe later on with your class, or like listening on the way to work or on a walk, we're just glad that you joined us, and we hope that these lessons will be a blessing to you and that you can benefit from them. So this is the what's been in the bulletin and kind of posted around the church building. This is our plan for the lessons. And so tonight we're starting off with Brandon Tatum, and I'll introduce him in a minute. But Brandon will be with us for Wednesday nights during the month of October. And then in the month of November, we're going to have Jeff Bigelow, and he may be joining us here on the call even. And then Phil Klutz in December. And then, like I said, Randy's going to be posting his videos. So a lot of good topics that I hope you'll enjoy and that will apply to you, kind of a wide spectrum of topics. People often mention to me that they're disappointed in our speaker series that they don't get to go to more than one of the classes. So hopefully this will also solve some of that problem by allowing people to watch more than one of the speakers here. So anyway, that's our plan going forward. And so we will get started tonight. So let me introduce Brandon Tatum. A lot of you know him already from church circles, from school circles. So Brandon's got a doctorate in education. He was recently the president of Oklahoma Christian Academy for 8 years, and transitioned over to be the CEO of an organization called ConnectEdu. And he's also executive director of the National Christian School Association. So doing a lot of good in the community, in the education community, and a big influencer in Christian education. So we're glad to have Brandon with us tonight. Brandon's married to Megan, and they have 3 children, Blakely and Gentry and Sawyer, and they're members at Memorial Road. So welcome, Brandon. Great to have you with us, and thanks for doing this. I'm going to get us started with a prayer, and then I'm going to mute myself and hand over sharing to Brandon. So pray with me if you would. Lord, we're so thankful for this time that we can be together. even in these challenging times where we can't physically be together. But we're glad to have this technology that we can join together, and then we can learn and share as a church in your word, share in becoming better Christians and better followers of you. So I just ask that you'll be with our speaker series here, help everything to go smoothly. I want to ask tonight that you'll be with Brandon and with the lessons that he's going to be bringing us. And we're just so thankful for his preparation and for what he's doing in the Christian community. Just ask that you'll bless him and his work and his family, and bless this series. We're thankful for Jesus and for everything that means in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, over to you, Brandon.
All right. Well, thank you for letting me be a part of this. We've tried to do this several times, and different things have come up, and so I'm really glad that we have this time together. So this is my family. This is a little older picture of us. My girls are 3 years old now, but like Preston said, I have twin daughters, Gentry and Blakely, a 6-year-old son, Sawyer, and my wife, Megan. And I have spent a lot of time trying to understand our younger generation. Obviously, I've been in education, and so from that perspective, I want to understand them. But almost more importantly, just as a dad, wanting to know how to best raise kids in this current culture, in this current climate. And so we're going to talk about Generation Z. When I say Generation Z, I'm specifically talking about kids born from 1995 and on. And so that kind of provides some context there. I know we'll probably have some people on the call who don't have kids, but maybe work with kids. We'll have some parents, and we also, I know we'll have some grandparents on the call. And so I want to try to hit it from every different angle here, but I'm really talking about those kids born after 1995 when I use the term Generation Z. To start, I want to show a video, and it's a video that kind of encapsulates several different generations, but it provides some context for us to start. So let me start with this video.
Values have shrunk to fantastic levels, taxes have risen, a host of unemployed citizens face the grim problem of existence. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Faster than a speeding bullet. December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. No matter how long it may take us, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute. Surrendered to the United Nations, the flags of freedom fly all over freedom. We'll remind every state and every citizen how urgent it is that all bars to equal opportunity and treatment be removed as promptly as possible. A series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. Shots fired from a high-powered rifle. The president, ladies and gentlemen, is dead.
We face difficulties of today and tomorrow. I still have a dream.
Yes!
we need in the United States is not division, not hatred, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another. And the end of its wind-up. Here's the clip. It'll be liberty, or it'll be defeat. The Beatles. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Okay, so Jeff Kingsley, one of your members at your church, shared a video with me, or not a video, an article with me a few years ago, and I thought it was a fascinating article. It was about Ellen Page, and it was from 1922. And there's several quotes in there. I'm going to share a couple of them this week. But she says, you parents and grandparents and friends and teachers and preachers, all of you, the war, you cry. It is the effect of the war. And then you blame prohibition, yet it is you who set the example there. But this is my point. Instead of helping us work out our problems with constructive, sympathetic thinking and acting, you have muddled them for us more hopelessly with destructive public condemnation. And I find this quote pretty interesting for a couple of reasons. One is, I don't know if human nature is the right word, but I think it is pretty common for older generations to look down on younger generations, criticize younger generations. I think the millennial generation kind of got the worst of it, right? I mean, we love dogging the millennials. And unfortunately, I am a recovering millennial myself, and understand, I think we understand why we were so critical of that generation, but it's just something that we tend to always do, is kind of look down on the younger generation. But I think it's important to recognize that there is a difference in sometimes generational outcomes and psychosocial development, or a better way to say it is life stages, right? There are some things that are unique to generations, but there are also some things that all 13-year-olds kind of go through, right? It's a life stage. And so over the course of the next 4 weeks, we're going to make some of those distinctions on what's a generational outcome and what's just a life stage. We're going to do that pretty heavily in week 3, actually. But the other interesting thing to this quote is, you blame it on the war. It's the effect of the war. You blame it on prohibition. One of the things that we tend to do with generations, researchers are really bad about this, is we want to blame everything on culture or events that have taken place. And so when we look at Generation Z, we look at these kinds of things that have happened in their lifetime, right? We see terrorism, we see violence and riots, we see racism. They've lived through a financial crisis. They've lived through wars. They've lived through a lot of different significant events. And, I think we need to recognize that culture and cultural events, they do shape us. For instance, Generation Z is found to be much more fiscally conservative. than the millennial generation even, right? When millennials were looking at going to colleges, they wanted the college that had the best rec center. And Generation Z is asking more practical questions like jobs and salaries and college debt. They're looking at it differently than millennials. Millennials wouldn't even really have asked those questions. And so obviously that's from the financial crisis, that's from them seeing their parents being laid off, that's from them seeing older siblings going to college and then going back home and not getting a job. So there are cultural events that shape us. But at the same time, and the reason I like that video is because it's a reminder that almost every generation has gone through similar events, right? So other generations experienced war at a young age. In fact, some generations, 15-year-olds fought in the war. Other generations went through financial crisis and the Great Depression. Other generations have lived through political scandals. Other generations have lived through racism and riots in the streets. And so these aren't unique necessarily to this generation, but it is interesting that this generation, our kids, have responded much differently to some of these events than previous generations. And so I think we have to look deeper than the cultural events. I think we have to respect that cultural events shape, but there's something going on deeper here. And that's what I want to spend the next 4 weeks discussing, kind of pulling back and looking deeper at these things. And so this week, we're going to talk about these 3 buckets. The emotional statistics and kind of what we're seeing from this generation, what we're seeing from them from a spiritual perspective, and then from a developmental perspective. And I also want to just mention that I'm talking about this generation in the aggregate, right? I mean, this is very stereotypical in nature. We know that not every kid falls into this bucket, but statistically, these are the things that we're seeing. Weeks 2 and weeks 3, we're going to get a little deeper into theology and how some of our theology might be impacting some generational outcomes. And then week 4, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the faith climate in which we're living and how that cultural faith climate is impacting our spiritual development. So as we look at the emotional landscape of this group of kids, there's some interesting statistics. A 2013 survey to college counseling directors showed that 95% of college counselors believe that the growing number of students on campus with psychological problems is of great concern. Fairly recently, I was meeting with a university president, not a university president in our state, it was a different state, but it was a Christian college, and he had just gotten back from an NCAA president's meeting. And they had a whole list on their agenda to talk about, but they predominantly talked about the emotional climate on their campus that they were seeing from students. So this particular Christian college president went back to his school, and he went to his counseling office and asked, hey, what are we seeing from an emotional stability point on our campus? And when they ran the numbers in a 2-year period, they had a 93% increase in students visiting the counseling offices. So there is something going on at a large level with the emotional stability of our children. One way to kind of classify this, I like this was done by the Growing Leaders Group. They say there has been an extinction of childlikeness and the extension of childishness. There's a couple of ways you could kind of categorize this. I think this would be an interesting point if you're watching the recording of this to maybe pause this and talk about this as a group. But one example is I came across research done in the 70s. It was actually 72. A gentleman was doing his dissertation, and he went to a small town in America and watched the children of the town, watched the parents of the town, and watched the interactions. And what he realized was there were different ages that you could you graduated from a certain age group and you got more freedom. And so many of you know exactly what I'm talking about. 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds could ride their bike in the driveway and in the street. 8 and 10-year-olds could ride their bike to the other neighborhood to see their friends. 12-year-olds were riding down to the gas station. And so as you got older, your freedoms kind of progressed. In 2000s, people went back to this researcher and said, hey, it would be interesting to go do that research again and try to mimic your research to see what you could come up with. So he goes back to that town. Interestingly, some of the kids that he had watched in the 70s now had children of their own. And he attempted to mimic his research and realized really quickly he could not mimic his research because the climate had changed so significantly. For instance, he couldn't even interview the kids in the area without parents wanting to be present and witness the interviews. There were just a lot of roadblocks, and it was just so different. I don't think that surprises many of us, but it's an interesting example. When we talk about the extension of childishness, we're seeing this in a lot of areas. We're seeing students not wanting to get their driver's license till a lot later. We're seeing students staying at home a lot later. There are a lot of places where we are seeing the extension of childishness. Some research that kind of points to this, a nationwide study of 18 to 25-year-olds, only 16% felt they were adults. So in the nationwide study of 18 to 25-year-olds, only 16% identified as an adult. In another nationwide study of 12 to 26-year-olds, only 20% were able to articulate purpose and find meaning. In week 3, we're going to dig a lot deeper into this stat. And then we're also going to talk a little bit there about generational outcomes versus life stages. But I think that's an interesting one. Here's something done by Tim Elmore, and I think this is an interesting one. So in early childhood, they would argue that we're seeing too much structure and organization, too much information, and too much responsibility. And when you look at adolescence, we're seeing too little responsibility and structure, too little accountability to a community, and too little meaningful activities and work. So next week, we're going to really dig into this. But one of the reasons I think we are seeing such an emotional strain on this group of kids is the amount of protection that is taking place from adversity. We are not expecting much of our kids, and they are becoming very much consumers. I mean, they are almost 100% consumers, and I think that we're seeing faith and development issues with that through technology, through expectations, through responsibility. But I thought this is an interesting slide. This might also be a good time to pause and talk about this if you're with a group. The parenting of Generation Z. A 2011 study from University of Tennessee in Chattanooga found that students with hovering or helicopter parents were more likely to take medication for anxiety, depression, or both. Four huge parenting mistakes. As parents, we risk too little, we rescue too quickly, we rant too easily, and we reward too frequently. I think these are 4 very interesting things that we could spend a lot of time kind of dissecting and thinking through. as grandparents, those of you grandparents on the call, I think this is at some level applicable to you as well. But we risk too little, we rescue too quickly, we rant too easily, and we reward too frequently. I grew up in Texas, and in Texas, I do not remember children riding sheep. But in Oklahoma, I have found that there are some kids who ride sheep, and my son is one of them. My 5-year-old son has decided, for whatever reason, he wants to be a sheep rider. We went to Edmond Youth Rodeo. It's on the weekends in the summertime. We were actually watching a young lady do barrel racing, and before the barrel racing, actually, after the bull riding, they do sheep riding. And my son's like, I want to do that. And I thought, this is going to be a very interesting conversation with your mother when we get home. So we came home, and he told his mom he wanted to ride sheep the next weekend. And so the next weekend comes along, and I show up to the rodeo arena, and I have to sign a form that says, essentially, if your son has an accident and is killed by a sheep, you will not sue us. And for whatever reason, I signed that document. Probably, I don't know if that was the worst parenting mistake to date that I've made, but I signed it. And we were off to the sheep riding chutes. And we get there, and it's our turn. And the sheep is in the chute. And if you know rodeo, there's like a bull chute there. And the sheep's in there. And I guess I assumed, because I did not grow up sheep riding, that there was like a volunteer cowboy that put your child on the sheep and kind of showed him the ropes. And I realized quickly there is no volunteer cowboy, and I am supposed to get in the chute and provide some sort of wisdom here for my child. And so I didn't know the strategy for sheep riding. I'm in there, and I said, son, hold on tight. And so this was our strategy for sheep riding. This is just what we decided to do, was to hug the sheep, just hold on, bud, and let's go for it. And so there's Sawyer coming out of the chute. Here's our strategy. I feel like it's pretty good form. Some of you might be able, Mr. Kelsey, you might be able to critique him better on this than I, but there he is, smile on his face, and he falls off. And I feel like I need to show you all the video. So here you go. Here's the video.
All right. Go, Sawyer, go! Get it!
There it is. All right. So there's my son, the sheep rider. And he gets up out of the dirt. And I walk out there, and he says, Dad, did I win? And in that moment, I don't know why, but I felt the parental urge to lie and say, yeah, you won. And I don't know why I felt that urge, but I just wanted him to be happy, right? But I've been doing all this research, and I thought I probably need to be honest with him. This is an opportunity to learn. I think way into things, way too much. And I tell him, no, buddy, you didn't win, but you did your best, and all we can do is our best and honor God, and we'll practice, and we'll try it again next time. Okay, so to my wife, that was like the worst thing you could tell a 5-year-old is just telling me won, right? And I know I'm reading into this, and I know it's a 5-year-old, but in my mind, I think there are moments in childhood where, as parents, we have to ask ourselves, am I trying to raise a happy 5-year-old or a functional 30-year-old? Because there's so many opportunities in childhood for them to learn low-level adversity that is a part of human development. And I'm afraid as parents that we are so worried about our children being happy that we have ended up raising a group of adults that are struggling to function. And if they're struggling to function, we can't even really talk about faith development. And so I think there's kind of two sides to this. We need to help our children learn to navigate life and the adversity of life. And it's a critical part of faith development. We see a lot of this in the New Testament about how perseverance produces character. Paul talks a lot about that. I even feel like he talks about it in the fruit of the Spirit. So let's talk about spirituality of this generation. Generation Z students are at least twice as likely as American adults to identify as LGBTQIA. It is acceptable for someone to be born one gender and feel like another. This was a question asked by Barna Group on a study. Over 40% of students said that, of engaged Christian Gen Z students, said definitely or probably. All of Gen Z, you can see where all of Gen Z was. 41% said definitely, and 28% said probably. One of the only reasons that I bring this up in this presentation is just the fact that this was thought to be asked in a survey with this generation. Most of you on this call, it would have never crossed any researcher's mind to even ask the question. So it tells you something about the climate in which our kids are living. And they're seeing it all over. The gender neutral, gender identity. And I think the thing that we need to be asking ourselves as a church and as parents and as grandparents is, how often are we talking to our kids about them being made in the image of God and what that means for their life? Because if we're not talking about them as image bearers and them as made in God's image, culture is going to speak into that. And for whatever reason, maybe we take that for granted and we just assume our kids know these things. But if we're not speaking into their identity and their image as children of God and as image bearers of Him in the world, our culture is going to speak into that. And I think we need to recognize that as a church and as parents and as grandparents. Here's some more statistics. Teens 13 to 18 years old are twice as likely as adults to say they're atheist. Half say happiness is their ultimate goal in life, which goes back to some of the earlier stuff we were talking about. In raising this generation, happiness has been an important aspect of raising them. We want them to be happy. Of course, we want them to be happy. But it has almost become the ultimate goal. Only 9% of Gen Z are engaged Christians. Engaged Christians are the only faith segment likely to say faith is central to their identity, and few teens overall see spiritual maturity as a worthy ambition. 1/4 of Gen Z strongly agrees that what is morally right and wrong changes over time based on society, which I think is interesting. 3 out of 5 among the eldest generation strongly agree that lying is immoral, while only 1/3 of Gen Z believes lying is wrong. Only about 1 in 4 among all Gen Z believe science and the Bible are complementary. More than 1/3 of Gen Z believes it is not possible to know for sure if God is real. Nearly half of teens, on par with millennials, say, I need factual evidence to support my beliefs, which helps to explain their uneasiness with the relationship between science and the Bible. This was a study that I had done with about 1,600 teens. 92% of those surveyed said they were Christians. And what we found was from 6th grade to 12th grade, their feelings of being closely connected to God decreased, which I think is an interesting one. This is another one, if you're watching this with a group, to pause and to talk about this, unpack this a little bit. I've shared this with several, a lot of youth ministers, college professors, preachers, Christian school educators, as we've tried to unpack this, and it's a hard one to unpack. I've done this 3 different times, and it always comes out to be this way. And so one of the things that we're going to unpack in weeks 2 and weeks 3 might connect with this some, but I'm not sure in our families, and I'm not sure in our churches, that our faith expectation for kids really changes from 6th grade to 12th grade. Think about that a little bit, but I'm not really sure that we have empowered and emboldened our children to really be who God has called them to be in 6th grade or in 12th grade. Now their mission trips have changed, right? I mean, their middle school mission trips are a little closer, and maybe in high school they get to go out of the country. And so that, like, some of the opportunities might change for them. But I'm not really sure our faith expectations change very much. That just might be something that you want to talk about. What does Gen Z care about? They actually care a lot. Like I said, they're fiscally conservative. So they actually care a lot about their career, financial independence, professional and educational achievement. These are the top 3 things when Barna did their research. These are the top 3 things that this generation cares about. And it's interesting, as you look at it. I mean, I think we would want God to be a part of that, obviously church to be a part of that. But I think as we look at this as parents, as church leaders, as youth ministers, I think one of the questions we should be asking is, okay, if these are the top 3 things our kids care about, how do we show them that this is connected to who God's called them to be, that God has given them gifts, and how can they use those gifts in their career? As individuals who maybe are on this call or watching this that don't have kids, how can you use your career or the skills God has given you and go find a kid that you think has those skills and those gifts and mentor that kid and help him see God's given you some things and here's how you can use those in the world. It might be a very relevant way to show our kids how God is actively working in the world. This is a quote from Ellen Page in that 1922 article. "Oh, parents, parents everywhere, point out to us the ideals of truly glorious and upright living. Believe in us, that we may learn to believe in ourselves, in humanity, in God. Be the living examples of your teachings, that you may inspire us with hope and courage, understanding and truth, love and faith. Remember that we are the parents of the future. Help us to be worthy of the sacred trust that will be ours. Make your lives such an inspiration to us that we, in our turn, will strive to become an inspiration to our children and to the ages. Is it too much to ask?" As I close out this first session, I just want us to remember that our kids are watching us, and that the best way to form faith in our children is to be the example that they need from us, and to put other adults in our children's lives that can also be the example to our kids. I know this first week was kind of high level, statistical, kind of depressing, which I'm sorry about. but this generation has a lot of opportunities and a lot of really good aspects that we're going to talk about in the next 3 weeks as we get a little bit more practical in what some of this looks like. But I want to end with one more video, and then I want to open it up for any questions.
I am part of a lost generation, and I refuse to believe that I can change the world. I realize this may be a shock, but happiness comes from within is a lie, and money will make me happy. So in 30 years, I will tell my children they are not the most important thing in my life. My employer will know that I have my priorities straight because work is more important than family. I tell you this, once upon a time, families stayed together. But this will not be true in my era. This is a quick fix society. Experts tell me 30 years from now, I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my divorce. I do not concede that I will live in a country of my own making. In the future, environmental destruction will be the norm. No longer can it be said that my peers and I care about this earth. It will be evident that my generation is apathetic and lethargic. It is foolish to presume that there's hope. And all of this will come true unless we choose to reverse it. There is hope. It is foolish to presume that my generation is apathetic and lethargic. It will be evident that my peers and I care about this earth. No longer can it be said that environmental destruction will be the norm. In the future, I will live in a country of my own making. I do not concede that 30 years from now, I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my divorce. Experts tell me this is a quick fix society, but this will not be true in my era. Families stayed together once upon a time. I tell you this, family is more important than work. I have my priorities straight because my employer will know that they are not the most important thing in my life. So in 30 years, I will tell my children, money will make me happy is a lie, and true happiness comes from within. I realize this may be a shock, but I can change the world, and I refuse to believe that I am part of a lost generation.
I love that video because it shows the dichotomy. It shows how often older generations kind of look at the younger generation and they presume some negative things about our kids and some of the outcomes. But really, if you know this generation, it's a pretty special group of kids. And there are a lot of very positive aspects of this group. And it's our job as the older generation to figure out ways to utilize those gifts, to shape and form those gifts, and to empower them to be who God's called them to be. So are there any questions? This is a set of discussion questions for those of you that are watching the recording, if you wanted to pause it and kind of talk through this with your group. But Preston, do we want to open it up for any questions?
Yeah. So thanks for the lesson, Brandon. I got a bunch of notes here, and I need to check in on sheep writing. That's on my list now. I'm from Texas too, so I hadn't heard of that. Appreciate everybody joining us tonight. And like I said, we'll be recording this and posting this. So if you want to go back and watch anything or re-listen to any parts of this, I know I'm probably going to do that myself. But again, thanks for everybody joining us tonight. Thanks again, Brandon. And like I said, we'll be back here at 7 p.m. next Wednesday if you want to join us live, or hopefully if you're watching the recorded session, you can enjoy the file. So everybody have a good one. Appreciate it.
Thank you.